Romans chapter 14 in verse 12, it says, "So then each one of us will give an account of himself to God." You know, when we think about God's judgment of every human being, I think that it's both comforting, but it's also a very sobering thought when you think about it. You know, it should be comforting to know that at that point justice is going to be doled out. Justice is going to prevail. And I can't help but think about some of the Psalms that we have been studying through, and how David, especially with his Psalms, he wants this justice, he wants this vengeance that he knows that God is eventually going to dole out, and it's not his to give, but it will be God's to give. And on that day, God will give it. Vengeance will be the Lord's. But you know, while that should be a comforting thought, knowing that God is such a just God, on the other hand, it's going to be impossible to escape the consequences of our actions on that day. Each one of us, Paul writes there, will give an account of himself to God. You know, we don't like to talk about accountability. It's not a word that people like to talk about much, but just think about that word accountability. The word accountable, it's similar to words like responsible, answerable, liable. So all of these words mean being obligated to answer for our actions to an authority figure. And so when we think about as students, we're accountable to our teachers. We're accountable to the administration. At work, as an employee, we're accountable to our boss. We're accountable to our employer. Within the family structure, children, they're accountable to their parents. We understand that. Now, a lot of times we don't like to be accountable to these different people, but we recognize that fact. And with God, surely the one that has created us, we're going to have to be accountable to. We're going to have to answer for our actions because He's given us free will. And so on that day, the question is going to be, well, what did you do with that free will? But notice that Paul says that each one must give account of himself to God. You know, when we stand before God, we're going to be expected to take responsibility for our own actions. Everyone is going to be responsible for themselves. You know, when you talk about responsibility or accountability, within our society, evasion of responsibility is a huge thing. And I can tell you about it all day long from work. People don't want to accept blame for anything. It's not my fault. And I think that we are teaching that within our society. It's not my fault. And we'll try to pass the buck or push the blame. On that day, it's not going to work. We're going to have to answer for ourselves. We're going to be responsible for our own actions. What other people have done, it's not going to matter. I might wish that I can stand on the judgment day for my children. My parents may wish they can stand for me. We're going to have to stand for ourselves and answer for ourselves. What choices did we make? Turn over to 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10. You know, in that day too, it's not that someone is going to be able to even speak on your behalf. Well, I know that they did this, but look at all this good stuff that they did. It's not going to work that way. 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10, it says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad." Paul wrote that we will answer for his deeds in the body according to what he has done. That implies that we'll account for our actual deeds. It's not that we knew what we were to do. We knew better. Well, I had planned to do this. Well, I had these good intentions. We're not going to be judged on what we had planned to do. We're not going to be judged on our good intentions or how good our heart may have been. We're going to give an account for the deeds done in the body according to what we have done. You can't sit here and say, I want to do good. I'm planning on it. One day maybe I will. We're going to give an account for the deeds that we have done while here upon this earth. And when that time comes for each one of us to give an account, we're going to wish at that point that we had had the courage to do the right thing. we're going to wish at that point that we had had the courage to do what was right. And at that point, if we have not, it's going to be too late. And so be prepared. Prepare yourself tonight. If you have these plans in your mind, if you have these good intentions, if you know the right thing to do and you have not done it yet, now's the right time to do it. Because when we stand before our Lord on the judgment day, it's going to be too late. That's what we want to help you with tonight. If we can help you in your service to God in any way, by being baptized, by returning to the Lord if you've got sin in your life, however we can help you in any way that we can, please come forward as we stand and sing the song that's been selected.